Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. All right. If you have listened to anything that I have said over the last few, maybe year and a half, you really should hear or have heard me talk about how the work that we do in diversity, equity, and inclusion goes far beyond what we do from 9 to 5. Right? DEI After 5 really is these conversations that happen after 5 o'clock. But it really is more of a movement on, this is the work that we need to be doing in our everyday lives outside of the work environment. And so today we are going to tackle, how do we start making those connections between what's happening in an organization, what an organization needs to do to create systemic change, and how we kind of bridge that gap into how does this look in our everyday lives. And so my guest today is Marika Messager, who is a consultant in this space, who's been doing this work for several years. So Marika, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. I'm very happy to join you today.
Yeah, so for people who may not know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this work?
Sure. So I am a consciousness researcher and teacher, and I go into companies, organizations, and I support people individually, as teams, and also as a bigger organization, as a system, to honor their own potential and the potential of the organizations through the technology of consciousness and conscious organization. I'm also a business angel to more than 15 startups and a trustee of an NGO in Lamu Island in Kenya. And I guess if I have to define myself, I really do believe, as you said, that it's all about embodying what we teach, and advocating and showing and demonstrating our visions, and this is what I aim to do in my everyday work and life.
Wonderful. So in your introduction you mentioned conscious organizations. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. What is a conscious organization? Well, we have different models to define a conscious organization, but most importantly, I would say that a conscious organization is an organization that stands firmly on 3 pillars: profit, people, and planet. And each of these pillars are of similar importance, which means that every decision, every governance process, every a practice within the organization has this as a foundation, that it has to benefit people, planet, and create profit.
Right. I'm so glad that you said that each one is equal in that space, because for so many organizations, they focus on the profit so much more than the people, or they focus on the people and not even necessarily the people that they serve. Well, no, their employees, the people that they serve, and forget a bit about the people that actually work with them. And then the planet, right? The greater impact. I always talk about when we talk about these things around diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm like, it's much more than a human resource conversation. It is, how are you impacting society? How are you impacting those in the communities that you serve? And so this even takes it a little bit further in, are your practices sustainable? Are you, this is just an example, right? For every one thing that you do, are you planting a tree? Or are you doing something that gives back to the earth? And so it's very interesting, because I think that this is a concept that is fairly new.
Yeah, for sure. As for every pioneering group, there is a spectrum, and we can see some organizations that are way ahead. They are pioneering in this space, and they are the ones really fighting the frictions and the resistance, and demonstrating what a conscious organization can do, how it feels to work in a conscious organization, how it's efficient and productive, whilst at the same time safe and caring for people, and positively impacting the earth, or at least stopping exploiting the earth. So there are many layers and dimensions, and then you've got the ones in the middle who are seeing that there is something going on, and they're starting to question, but they are they probably need a bit of more proof of what a conscious organization can be, right? And then we've got the ones that are like far behind, and some are holding on to the old system. So there is a whole spectrum, but those organizations do exist.
So when we talk about these three kind of stages that organizations go through, for those that are in the middle, or those that are just figuring out this is what they want to do, we're talking about change. We're talking about change management. We're talking about creating or shifting systems, breaking systems, right? How do you begin that process of getting them out of well, this is how we've always done this, to, okay, we need to create some systemic change that will impact us in the long term, in the long run?
Yeah. Well, when we go into organizations with that advisory component, we are able to assess the human centricity of an organization. So we are assessing different dimensions within the organizations, and employees, leaders, the culture, the governance processes, the kind of impact and legacy. So we assess all of that, and we're then able to give them a clear picture of where they are when it comes to their people pillar in their organization. And we're able to show them how it's costing the organization when the people pillar is not healthy enough, right? And so we can see the beauty of our model is that we can really pinpoint, where the kind of clusters of unhealthiness, and where to start. But really, it's through giving people the tool to name as well what's going on. So we're going is like there is a burnout culture in your organization, right? Everybody is exhausted, is overworked. Everybody is remote, so there is this sense of loneliness. You haven't built the ecosystem to actually function properly as a distributed work company. So when you diagnose, it's half of the work. Like, people are like, okay, I can see that there are some things that are not functioning or dysfunctioning, and I think that today, in this day and age, there has been enough work done by certain industries such as hospitality, travel, on customer experience, because they know that if the customer experience is good, then clients are going to be happy and they're going to come back, right? So the link between customer experience and profit has already been made, and now we're just saying, looking at the employee experience is going to provide you the same, if not more, leverage than when you started to look at customer experience. But some industries are way ahead of the curve. I was recently speaking with the group Hyatt, and they already know that in order to create like a fulfilling customer experience, they need to take care of their employees. So and then you've got certain industries that are kind of lagging behind. I worked in finance for 15 years, and I was managing 50 people, and I left 12 years ago, but it hasn't evolved so much. Look, I know that the distortions that I have observed and experienced myself are still there, and sometimes they're even worse. So it's also useful to have, like, we have this holistic understanding of the human centricity level of consciousness within different industries, because some industries can role model healthy behaviors.
It's so important, because I talk quite a bit, and the work that I do is around psychological safety. And part of that is that human element. It is, do people feel that they are seen and valued and can contribute in meaningful ways where the organization values that? And they're not just seen as part of a machine or, a cog in a wheel that if they get burnt out, we could just push them to the side and get someone else to fit into that. And I think that many of the industries that are figuring that out is, just as you were saying, hospitality is one where the light bulb has come on of, oh, if we can keep our employees happy, they'll keep our customers happy. We're not having to deal with attrition. We're not having to deal, the levels of attrition are not as high.
Yeah.
We're getting more quality experiences for our customers because now our employees can be more creative in this space to really figure out, these are what our customers need, right? And so you can build that into how the organization operates and functions. And so as you were using that example, I started thinking about some industries that I work with where they're a little bit behind in understanding the value that their employees bring to the table. And they're still very much in that mindset of, if you're not happy here, you can go somewhere else because this is our culture. And so for organizations like that, where they don't necessarily focus on these 3 Ps, where they only focus on the profit piece and not the people or planet piece, what is their future? Like, what does that look like?
It looks dull, to be honest. No, but the truth is, every organization these days has to attract and retain talents. Every organization wants, employees that are engaged. And those are only going to happen, employee engagement and attaining and retaining talent. Innovation, right? Those are really only going to happen when people work well together, where people are being cared of, are being taken care of by their policies, their company culture, and all of that. So it's going to be harder and harder, and we also see that the younger generations are very much wanting this. They want to work for a company that has a vision and a mission and has an impact. And now people ask, is there a yoga class when I joined the company? I mean, if I were to ask that 25 years ago when I started, I would have been out of the door in 2 seconds, right? So things are, like the new generation of employees have different requirements. And so, companies have to adapt as well if they want to retain and attract those talents. So the ones that are not going to move towards those conscious organizations, models, for me, are gonna potentially lose their market leadership because they will not be able to gain the best people in their field. And also for their customers, I mean, people are becoming more and more aware of their way to consume and what they're consuming, and are more and more asking for conscious products, ethical ways of production. So that there is a lot at play. It's like it's a systemic challenge and opportunity at the same time. So for me, it's you're going to hit the wall at some point, because it's just a matter of how long you can still entertain the old way. But for sure, it's not a birthplace of growth and innovation. So limited success, if not worse.
I love that phrase. It's not the birthplace of innovation, right? Success and innovation. Because you can't grow if you're not moving.
Yeah, I mean, I say you either grow or you rot. There is no in between. And also we live in a world that is VUCA, right? So it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, which means that we have to be agile. We have to be able to pivot. a business strategy, a team all the time. So those this requires skills that were not necessarily required 30 years ago, 20 years ago, or 15 years ago. So conscious leadership and conscious organizations, it's also about cultivating that emotional intelligence, that relational intelligence, so that individually and together we are able to pivot, to assess, and to be agile together. So it's not only innovation, it's also high caliber execution, high caliber team execution.
Yes. I'm loving everything you're saying, because it's funny. We our last episode of the show aligned with this as well. We talked about the importance of agility and being fluid and flexible, and how organizations that are rigid will not survive the next 10 years because everything is moving so quickly. And we've always been, I can't say always, but for the most part, we've been a pretty global enterprise, in that we are so well connected to other parts of the world, but we're now at a place where I think we're also learning from other parts and other cultures that can help benefit how we're approaching certain projects, or even problems with solutions that are not the typical Western solution. And so we're in a wonderful space to tap into the diverse tapestry that is who we are and what we do. And so that kind of leads to this transition of, both you and I work with organizations, we work with corporations, but so much of what makes this successful is how we live inclusive lives, right? How do we see the world in the work that we do, so that it's not just from 9 to 5, right? It is 24/7 and everything. And so the more and more I am looking at this work, and you're talking about conscious leadership and conscious organizations, that doesn't turn on and off at the end of the workday, right? That continues. And so what are some of the ways that leaders can continue this work once that office light goes off?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a way of life, it doesn't really stop. You don't turn it on when you arrive at the office. It's skills and traits within you, and qualities within you, and thought mastery, word mastery. So it's everything that we practice every second of our lives, right? Consciousness. If we have to define consciousness, it's in its most simple form. It is the space between an event and a response, right? So when we're unconscious, we react. When we are conscious, we respond. So response is forged, it's created, it's designed in that pose, right? So every day, every moment we are creating. And so every moment we want to be consciously creating, which is, what am I thinking? Are my thoughts, my words, my emotions, my actions all aligned? Because if they are not, there is something wrong. Yeah. There is something that either I'm denying, or I am not feeling, or I am avoiding, or I am manipulating. But the consciousness is really a technology of alignment. And so how do we get to that place of alignment? As individuals, as teams, as an organization. But when everything is aligned, even when we go back to, we can learn a lot from that technology and what we see happening in the workspace and in our social and personal space. They're always all connected, and there is a butterfly effect, which means that if I grow, if I push myself out of my comfort zone at work and I level up about something, and it can be very simple as having a difficult conversation where we normally would shy away from it, but we are actually, provoking it because we have learned the tools and we have created the space to prepare, and we know what we want to achieve, what's the intent. So we are going for it, right? And it turns out well, which, means that you you are confirming to yourself that you can navigate a difficult conversation, well, then you bring that with you. It's not just a difficult conversation with your boss, it's with a friend, with your spouse, everything.
Yeah. The word that comes to my mind when you talk about the difference between conscious reaction and response for when you're conscious response and unconscious reaction is intentionality.
Yeah.
Right. And being intentional in how you respond, and you're being very thoughtful of that alignment. Like, I'm a visual person, so when you were saying that, I physically stood up because it just felt like this. Okay, so I see what's happening. I want to be very conscious of how I respond. And so I want to make sure that there's that alignment in my reaction and or my response, versus when you're not thinking about something and you're just reacting just to react, right? That there may be alignment in some ways, but you're not necessarily conscious of why, right? Or it's not an intentional process. And so I thought that was just a beautiful way of pulling that together, because in being a conscious person, leader, and I call everybody a leader, right? If you are with people, you are in leadership. But in being very conscious of that, it does permeate all aspects of your life. It does show up in different ways. And, that example of having that difficult conversation in one place gives you the courage to be able to do it in other areas and aspects. And even setting boundaries, I think that's a hard one for people. We may be really great at setting boundaries in one aspect of our lives and horrible in another. And so being very conscious.
When I see those, I call them like the lack of resonance, right? If you behave a certain way at home and you behave in a different way at work, it means for sure that there is some unconsciousness there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a lack of alignment with how you show up and who you are and the values based upon which you behave, right? So it means that, there is an unconscious programming. There is, an emotional immaturity that doesn't allow you to show up in a consistent and congruent way. So it's always a place to start looking, because conscious leadership is not about blaming and shaming. It's really about being accepting and compassionate with ourselves. We all grew up in a toxic system, in a distorted system. So we all have some parts of it within us, and we all have some defense mechanism. And so, distorted behaviors is something that, I would invite everyone to accept that we might display some distorted behavior, but have the intention to change them, to educate ourselves on what are healthy behaviors, and be compassionate with one another, but yet take no shit, right?
Right. That part. That part. And it is so true. It's like a fish in water, right? A fish doesn't realize that it's in water until you take it out of water, and it's like, wait a minute, there's something missing. And so for so many people, as you were saying, we were raised and grew up in a very toxic environment and culture. Once you're taken out of that, you're like, wait a minute, something's not right. Or maybe it is right, and I just was dealing with something that was very wrong this entire time. And so again, it's that very conscious, internal, introspective work of our values and aligning our values and what is important to us, so that we can show up authentically, so that we can be a very conscious person in what's important and how we're relating to other people at work and in life.
Yeah, and I really like your analogy, because it's really what it is. We can only level up our systemic intelligence once we are exposed to different systems, so that we can see that there is actually a system. And I think that's the beauty and the gift of diversity and inclusion. Because, and I go to Africa, I go to Kenya a lot. So I live there 3-4 months a year, sometimes some years in a small village. So that inclusivity and community is something I've done a lot of research on. But if you really want to dive into diversity and inclusion, you have to understand the other one's point of view, and why is it that they have those beliefs, where are they coming from, what is their history, what is the history of their what is their culture and the history of their culture, right? What are the collective wounds that have been programmed onto that person, and how do I integrate those this kind of design, right, this identity, so that I know how to behave in the best way possible to respect the other, right? So that I'm going to be conscious about not triggering the other about something that might not trigger me, but it might trigger them, and so I'm going to pay attention to that, right?
Yeah.
So this is consciousness. We can only be discerning about others if we have done the work on ourselves.
I love that you said it's how can I learn about what's happening so that I do not trigger the other person. I'm not taking advantage of, and the word you used was respect. And I think that's such a critical piece of this. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, this work is not about you. It is about other people. It is about how you are showing up and creating space for other people. And it's a way of decentering yourself in that process. And so a big part of that is respect. How are you showing respect to others? Because as a community, and I love that you spoke about it in that sense of community, you are then part of that, the consideration of other people as well.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are doing your part and they are doing their parts, you are not left out because they are considering you and respecting you as a part of that entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
And, the dominant cultures of the world, will tell you that it's all about me. And everything needs to start to be centered on me, and everyone else needs to change. And I need to just do whatever I want to do because I am the most important person in this room, in this space.
Yeah. And there is a lot to say about entitlement and impunity as well, and victimization. I mean, there are loads of distorted behaviors around, for sure. But we live in a system that is selfish, that is narcissistic. We also live in a system that is a zero-sum game. If you win, I lose. So we're always trying to take from one another. So once you start to see things from that systemic level, you're not against one another. It's like, how can we come together to change that system? So if we talk about the zero-sum game, how can we create win-win-win situations, right? And how can we start envisioning that possibility? We have to be able to think out of the box, and be like, okay, so my needs, my wants, my desires, my requirements, that of the other person, can we come together? But then we are really looking for compatibility, which is truth. It's like, it's not like when we do business this way, we are really making sure that everybody's happy. I'm selling a product that I love to somebody who needs it at the right price. And we're both, I'm not
usually beneficial, right?
But I'm not going to use, some, for me, vintage marketing tactics of scarcity. We're beyond that. We want everybody to really benefit.
Yeah.
So we need to have that conversation of truth. What do I want? What do you want? Are we a fit?
Yeah, I love that. Marika, what are the things that you do to kind of take care of yourself? Like this can be stressful work, because even as I'm thinking through this, I'm just like, okay, my anxiety just went up. But what are the things that you do to take care of yourself as you're doing this work?
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of people tell me, oh, it's amazing what you do. And like, yeah, it's very, very interesting, but it's also, it's about also being living those teachings and staying in alignment with them. So I'm working myself all the time as a woman, as a mother, as a friend, as an entrepreneur, as a boss, and that's the beauty of this work. And so self-care is crucial, definitely. And I have many ways. I've been on this path for more than 25 years. So I have a big toolbox. I know myself very well. So I know if it's my mental body, my emotional body, my physical body, my spiritual body that need to be taken care of. I have some specific practices for each. I have also some specific tools for depending on how bad I feel, like if I'm really like exhausted, I mean, I'm not going to go for a run. So, it's like also building that level of self-care with compassion. But I do a lot of yoga. So I trained as a yoga teacher like 15 years ago. And, it's been a very solid practice of mine that really has helped me through, difficult transitions and really helping me process my emotions and release them so that I could stay focused on what I had to do. I love swimming. So I swim these days. I swim once a week because that really helps me release emotions and stress. So I always have an intention to cleanse myself. And then I go for like a steam bath and stuff like that. Sometimes, I love to go for a walk. I'm in London, so we have beautiful parks there. And yeah, sometimes it's having fun as well. Is self-care, So yeah, it's really having that consciousness of being very simple in the way you approach life. In terms of, is this good for me? Is this not good for me? Is this place, that person, that relationship, good for me or not? But to come to that place of simplicity, you have to know yourself very well and to accept who you are. And then it's quite simple. I also noticed that, I work from different locations, and each location comes with its challenges and opportunities in terms of how I care for myself. So, in London, it's harder. It's more of an effort. When I'm close to nature, it's quite easy. I don't have much to do.
I love it. So if people wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, you can go on our website, consciousleadership.org, and there is a contact form. So if you want to get in touch, I'm always happy to have conversations. We have a lot on the website, a lot of free resources. There is a free masterclass on redefining success. There is an assessment as well to assess your leadership. So there are plenty of ways to go deeper into conscious leadership. Then you can follow me on social media, on LinkedIn, Marika Messager, Marika, and my last name is Messager, Messager, and Instagram as well.
Wonderful. Marika, thank you so much for being here and uplifting our consciousness in this space, because I think so many people want to be a conscious leader and they want to think about it in the right ways, but how you just outlined the alignment that is necessary and how you need to embody this. This is not just something that you do at work. This is something that you have to embody as a part of yourself. And so I think that it's so important that we think about this work in that way.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing.
Thank you, Sacha. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in to this week's episode. Again, I hope that you were able to take some notes and take away a few nuggets that you can start thinking about in your leadership journey. And as always, you can find us here every Tuesday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern, YouTube, wherever you find your podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And of course, Until next time, have a good one.